Everyone has a story to tell. It's my mission to tell it. Unscripted, unedited. We are on the record. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarina Fazan, and thank you so much for joining us for this episode. You know, this show, we take such pride in highlighting the good in the community and the incredible stories from incredible people. We have two incredible people in the studio right now. Michelle Turman, the CEO of Catalyst Consulting Services, and Dr. Mark Mosley, the president of USF, see, it doesn't roll off the tongue too easily, and TGP. Yep. I said to them, this show is unedited, unscripted. I said, Dr. Mosley, I might have a problem getting it out. But wow, great to have you both here.
Thank you for having us.
So today's show, we're going to talk about Crohn's disease and why it's so important to share the mission of research. But tell us how the two of you got connected. I know you're both diagnosed with Crohn's disease.
So we got connected, I want to say about 1.5 years ago. And I have Crohn's, as you mentioned, and I was struggling. I was not in remission at the time. And we had a mutual friend, personally a longtime friend of mine. And I was sharing with her I was really struggling. And she says, you know, there's somebody I want to introduce you to. And it wasn't so much, let me get you to a doctor. It was just, you need to know this person's here. He's just been brought in from Ohio. They're doing great things in terms of Crohn's and irritable bowel. Let me just connect you. And we went to lunch. And it's really amazing, I find, when you meet people that have Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or other things, they just sort of share. And it was just like we were friends. And we started sharing just about each other and what we had, our diagnosis. What are you on? What am I on? And then, you know, he asked, how I was feeling. And I said, I'm not really feeling that well. And within a week or so, they helped really get me on a path that really helped get me back into remission. And that it was a chance meeting. And I just look back and I think about all the things we've done together. And I know we'll talk about it today. But
Absolutely.
I'm so grateful for that lunch at Mise en Place and meeting him because for me, it was truly life-changing in my care moving forward.
And Dr. Mosley, I want to point out that you started as an emergency room doctor. Yes. Now he's a big wig, clearly. I can't even get the title out. So thank you again. And I come from a family of physicians, so we've often talked about it on the air. So greatest respect, of course, for doctors and incredible women like yourself, Michelle. So, doctor, though, can you explain to us? Firstly, what is your current position now? Sure. And then also get into what is Crohn's disease?
Sure. So thanks for the opportunity to be here today. One of the challenges I always have when I'm talking about this is while I am a physician and have taken care of patients for 20 years, my experience as a patient is really what brings me to Crohn's disease. And so one of the things that we'll highlight on is how complex that disease is and how specialized it is. So even though I'm a physician, there are parts of it that I would say that while I understand it, it's hard to explain it. The easy part for me is I'm a physician executive. I help lead a large physician group between Tampa General and USF. And I'm passionate about that and what we're doing in the community and to serve the patients at Tampa Bay.
Let me ask you
Sure.
before you continue, because of your position right now, and because you are a patient, right, with Crohn's disease, do you feel that helps put more light on Crohn's disease?
I hope so. It's something I'm passionate about. I feel very blessed and fortunate and privileged that I've had wonderful physicians and people to take care of me for the last 15 years with Crohn's disease. And I really want to bring that to other people. And as Michelle said, a lot of it is just personal connections, a chance for us to talk and share our stories with a lot of commonalities, the impact on our lives, our families, our careers. And it's something that I try to never forget because other people did for me. I want to pay it forward to do it for other people.
And I know we're still going to talk about exactly what Crohn's disease is, but
Sure.
You both have been diagnosed, what now, for 15 years, 14 and 15 years. Wow. So getting that diagnosis, I'm sure, must have been a shock.
I know for me it was because I was 36 at the time.
Wow.
And I thought, why am I getting diagnosed now? And, after having children and this late, and as far as I know, I wasn't able to trace it back to anybody in my family at that time. And I just didn't understand. And I think there was a part of me that was a lot of shame. And it took me a while to wrap my brain around, this is what I have, and it will be forever.
But why shame?
At that point, at least for me, I don't know about other women out there, but, in your 30s, for the majority of us, you're building your career, whether it's inside or outside the home. I had 2 young children. I was a CEO at the time. And you don't really want to admit to anybody, and nor is it popular, just like in mental health, to talk about these things. And I was really sick. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I was really sick. I was losing weight. I wasn't feeling well. And so that was a journey, and I was embarrassed. And I would say it wasn't until, I'll be 50 this year, full disclosure, but it probably wasn't until 4 years later I started sharing that with people. And I was amazed that the more I shared, I realized, oh my goodness, I learned more people were suffering as well. And initially people would say, oh, you're so young. Well, I'm not always going to be that young. And now I'm amazed because I meet people that are 7, 13. So this is not something that's age specific and has changed symptomatically. But initially I was just shocked. I was heartbroken. I'm going to have to live with this the rest of my life. I didn't know what it meant. And it's been a very humbling experience, and one that initially, again, very close to Vess. And I noticed the more I shared it, the more open I became with my children and seeing what that meant, what therapies look like, and letting them in that journey. Like, this is just now part of me. It's who I am. It doesn't make
mom
me,
is.
Yeah, it doesn't make me less than as a woman, as an entrepreneur.
It's a really common occurrence. I felt the same way. I was just starting the ascent in my career and to take on leadership roles, and I had a little bit of a different pathway, which we can talk about, but I had an emergent infection and had to go and have emergent surgery.
And you're an emergency room
Yeah.
physician. I mean,
Yeah, and it took me out of the workforce for the first time in my entire life. I was out for weeks, and I had a very difficult recovery, and it was only after I didn't get better that people started putting two and two together and coming up with, there's something else going on here. And then I was fortunate to be diagnosed. But I think it highlights the challenges with being diagnosed with a chronic condition. You're told that you have something that isn't curable, and that you're going to have to take medications and therapies, and it's going to change your life. And I think at the time that maybe both of us got diagnosed with it, that was really hard for us to accept.
well, doctor, talk to us too about, you guys were both diagnosed later on in life. So this diagnosis, I mean, does it just happen? I mean, how do you get Crohn's disease?
Yeah, so it's a good question and a really complex answer. There's a lot about Crohn's disease and other inflammatory bowel diseases like ulcerative colitis that we just don't fully understand. There may be some genetic component to it. There may be some environmental components to it. It may be that you're exposed to an infection that switches your immune system on and attacks your body. But it's poorly understood, and I think that's one of the challenges for me as a physician and as an applied scientist. I want to understand it, and there's sometimes the answers we just don't know, and that's really frustrating. I think the other part of it is that we've seen an explosion in new therapies over the last 10 to 15 years, whereas in the past there was a very limited options for what you could do for people. So now there's so many different therapies that are coming out and available. It's made the complexity of managing it harder, but it's also been exciting that there are therapies for people that have different symptoms. Crohn's disease can affect any part of your GI tract. And so if it affects a certain part of your GI tract, so Michelle may have it in a different part of her GI tract than I do, and she might have very different symptoms than I do. In kids and children, it's a very different disease. It tends to lead to restrictions in growth and nutritional challenges. And then the challenge of figuring out the therapy for kids is so hard because the toxicity of the therapies that we might be able to tolerate as nearly 50-somethings is very different than the risk profile you would expose, say, a 10-year-old to.
Absolutely. I was sharing with the two of you that I was a morning anchor in the Quad Cities. It was my first job. And the general manager at the time, his 10-year-old son was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So we did numerous stories because they were devastated. They didn't know what to do, how to handle it. And the care of a 10-year-old or 7-year-old that you even mentioned to our age is different, or at least understanding it can be.
Yeah, I think what maybe allowed us to bond when we met was the shared experience that we had, that even though our diagnosis was different and how Crohn's affected us was different, I think we went through those stages of grief about being diagnosed with a chronic condition that we know is going to impact our life. The question, I think, for everybody that gets it is, well, how much? Am I still going to be able to do what I do? Am I going to still be able to have my family and my career? How is this therapy or the complications of the disease going to impact me? I think when you reach remission too, you always live in fear that, you're not going to be in remission anymore and that it's going to impact your life in a negative way. I think when you're in remission, sometimes you forget you have it, which is exciting and wonderful. But then when you have doctor's visits or you have procedures or things that you need to care for yourself, it reminds you again that you have this chronic condition that's going to be with you for the rest of your life.
Though, you can survive it, though. Mm-hmm. So that, there is some comfort in that. Would you say, Michelle?
Absolutely. There's varying degrees, I think, and everyone's different. That might scare you depending on your journey. Whether it's a resectioning or, some people have a colostomy bag. There's so many different degrees. So the more I think you get a little bit nervous. But I will say, outside of really coming to terms with what I had, it's been the journey of understanding also how it changes the older I get. And in remission, not in remission, and really responding. And it's really the greatest lesson to say, look, you have to continue to put your health first. Mm-hmm. Like you cannot not do that with this disease. You have got to put your health first and really figure out so you have a good quality of life, whatever that looks like for you, and really make sure that you're with a doctor who understands what that looks like. And I know in my case, many others, it affects, that type of inflammation affects other things. And so it just became where I needed to have a continuum of care in one place, and ultimately switched everything over to USF because it was changing the type of remission or out of remission I had. It affected other parts of my body, and I really wanted to have all my doctors on the same platform of my chart and sharing test results, because it just does get exhausting managing a disease like this, as I'm sure other people have, and it's exhausting trying to get all the results and do that and push that forward. So I think of people that don't have that, or people that are older than us, that they even struggle with who's your champion. And you really have to be your advocate. You really have to make sure you have the best care. And what are you doing to get everything in place so they have a full profile of how maybe Crohn's is affecting not just your gut, but other areas.
And I want to explore that more and why it was so important for you and to reach out to Dr. Moseley. And we're going to do that right when we come back. Stay with us. We're going to go to a quick break.
Precision Garage Door, this is Sophia. How may I help you?
It's the people who work here that make the difference.
That's what we're all here for, teamwork, right?
Exactly, yeah.
That's why we're here for you today.
With one purpose.
If you need us, Precision is here for you.
To give their best to our customers.
We put out love and we get like 10 times back.
You get it coming back too.
Yeah.
We work for you. So thank you, Tampa Bay, for year after year making Precision Garage Door a top workplace.
Label Swap is a retail store that you can bring in the items you don't want anymore. We will buy them for either a cash offer or store credit, and you can also shop the items as well. We carry anything from H&M, Lululemon, up to your luxury items like Gucci and Louis Vuitton. There's nothing really around like it here in the market. It is a fun, personalized experience.
I'm Sarina Fazan, a journalist, producer, and podcast host. With a background in television news, I know how much time and talent it takes to produce a broadcast quality production. But no more. Red House Streaming offers a simple, cost-effective method for capturing live action and streaming it in real time to YouTube, Facebook, or any other website. From single camera shoots or multi-camera productions, conventional or virtual sets, and from the state-of-the-art Red House Streaming Studios to remote locations, the professional crew at Red House Streaming, backed by the technology and reputation of CP Communications, allows you to produce more content at a lower cost and with little to no engineering required. That's why my podcast, On the Record with Sarina Fazan, is streamed live from the Red House Streaming Studios each week. Contact Red House Streaming today at 800-762-4254 or online at cpcoms.com to learn more. I'll see you in the studio. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to On the Record. With us is Dr. Mark Moseley, the president of USF Health and TGP. Yay, I got it right. And Michelle Turman, the CEO of Catalyst Consulting Services. Thank you both so much for being here. And we're talking about a very, very sensitive subject, Crohn's disease, and shedding more awareness about the disease. If you are joining us late, Michelle was just sharing on how you moved all of your health care to USF because it became exhausting for you, right? And would you please share the story, though? You were having an issue going on with your eyes, but you thought that that might be associated with Crohn's disease.
Sure. So I, by this point, was diagnosed with Crohn's. I was on a medication that was working, I thought, fairly well. And there were just some things, other things happening. And I got an eye infection, and it's called uveitis, and it's sort of similar to pink eye without all the stuff that comes out. But you're sensitive to light. You just, that's what it feels like. And I went in, and they just diagnosed it with steroid drops. They said, okay, this is what it is. And it wouldn't go away. It just kept coming back like 8 times. And so they put me on oral steroids. I'm like, well, I've done this before with Crohn's. And then finally, I just mentioned to my doctor, I was like, you know, I had Crohn's, the optometrist. And he was like, and then we just put one and one together. And that was one example. And then really the older I got, what I then later learned was if the inflammation in my gut, for example, was not at bay or was not in remission, for me, how it presented itself was it would kind of attack the soft tissue. So that is a very common thing. I know if a medication isn't working, I get those eye infections. Another thing for me is around the mouth. So you would get like acne breakouts here. And I noticed the older that I got, this is just me, it wasn't just about cramping or the uncomfortable things we talk about. The inflammation would shift and the symptoms would shift to that quality of life. And quite frankly, to have an optometrist or an OB or all these different doctors that we go to, all of us, it was overwhelming to fax records, you know, this is back in the day, pulling it together. And about the time I met Dr. Mosley, and we just started off with a gastroenterologist, I went home and I looked at my husband and I said, I'm going to do something that I think is really hard. And he says, what? And I said, I'm going to move every single doctor in the next 6 months, that was my goal, to USF Health. I mean, OB that I've had for 20 years. He says, why are you going to do that? I said, because they are creating a way to share records for doctors within the USF system. And I'm exhausted. I don't know how people do this. I can't do it myself anymore. And billing and insurance, all that. And I literally methodically moved every doctor.
Wow.
I think that that's a really important point, Michelle, because this is a complex disease. It's not just something that affects your GI tract. There's this whole part of extraintestinal manifestations of Crohn's disease that can impact so many things: fatigue, arthritis, fevers, so many different organ systems in your body. And so you have to have people that understand that and can connect that complexity and say, well, you know, when you're having these eye symptoms, could it be uveitis? Because they've seen it before. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, I feel really passionate about is offering that complete care of the patient. You know, one of the ways that we talk about it is a disease center of excellence. So an area where, you know, you're coming in as a Crohn's disease patient, and all we're going to see in that particular disease center of excellence are other Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis patients. That's all we do in that area, so that we can take care of the physical, the mental, the social, all of the different components of that disease process that you're being asked to manage as a patient.
And how important is that, doctor, do you think? Because as we talked about too, you don't want people to move out of the area to seek care. We want to be able to provide that care in our community.
Yeah, I think as Crohn's disease has gotten more complex and the therapies for Crohn's disease have gotten more numerous, it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing that you have many therapeutic options for patients now that can really help us achieve remission. But the problem is it's so specialized. And so I think there's a certain point where, like Michelle got to, and I've been in the past, like I want somebody, I know she does too, that really understands the totality of this disease process. And so whether I was just diagnosed with it or I've had it for 15 years, I have an expert that can tell me, what to expect, what therapies I need to be on. So I think that part's really important. The other thing is that we don't want people going to the airport to get their care in Tampa Bay. We feel a sense of obligation to this community. We want them to have world-class care. And they should be able to expect that here.
And I appreciate the two of you so much too, sharing your personal stories. Dr. Mosley, you were talking about you're on a treatment and you've been on a treatment for several years, but now you may not be on that treatment any longer. And why is that?
Sure. So one of the big challenges in Crohn's disease is that it's always a tug of war between the benefits of the therapy, but the side effects. All medications have side effects, and the medications that we're on for Crohn's disease, while they're great drugs, they have lots of side effects. And so part of really going to that specialist is helping you understand what those side effects are, how you're supposed to manage them, and then at what point does it no longer make sense for you to be on that therapy anymore because the risk and the benefits switch. So when I was first diagnosed, I was started on a particular medicine, almost 15 years ago, and it was great. It put me in remission. I've done really well on it. But as time goes on, the risks and the side effects, which can be minor to all the way developing something like cancer from the therapy.
It's so scary.
Yeah, it is. You have to manage that, and you need somebody that really understands that. Because I don't want to stop this drug that I'm on and get thrown out of remission and start having a terrible flare of my Crohn's disease. That's not good either. So it's a delicate balance of figuring out what works. And that has to be done with somebody and in a center that knows how to manage it.
And Michelle, speaking of that, you were recommended for this show. So like I always ask viewers, please, share, give us ideas, share topics. And someone said, can you please interview or have Michelle Turman on the show? You're so generous, and you're going to come back. I'm going to have you back to talk about your business. Oh my gosh. I mean, Catalyst Consulting Services. But you gave a $25,000 gift to USF. Share why that was important for you to do that, and thank you so much for doing that.
Well, you're welcome. First, I went to USF, and this was the second gift I gave to USF, and I've done a third one recently to USF Health for suicide prevention and research. This was really important. Number one, I was really inspired by Dr. Mosley and the doctors that I met. Number one, in their vision of what the Irritable Bowel Disease Center will be and the resource it will be. And I was so, and am still, so grateful for the care that I've received and continue to receive. I felt really strongly that to continue to stop the stigma, to talk about it, to make this gift, and to be public with the gift, not to say, hey, look at me, isn't this great? But it's stopping the stigma and to let people know this resource will be here. And the gift is really split in two ways. Number one is to support research, which is so important, so we can continue to understand, find therapies, and create this center. The other part of it will go to underwrite the nurses station, which is extremely important. My aunt was a nurse who passed away from cancer.
So sorry.
And thank you. But you can't imagine, or maybe you can imagine, I know you can, when you go into some of these procedures, colonoscopies, endoscopies, you name it, and this doesn't undercut any other type of procedure, but nurses are incredible.
Incredible.
Champions from holding your hand, when you're counting to 10, and because it can be very anxiety ridden to waking up. This is not the sexiest disease here. So I just wanted to do something that when they're sitting there and they're entering notes and maybe they're not having a great day, that they know somebody cared enough about them to say, we support you. And this is it's very important to me. And so part of it was I believed in the vision. I believe that we need to have this here. And my hope was also, let's get out and talk about it so other people will invest, other people will know about what we're doing, and have some empathy and appreciation for what the nurses and doctors are doing, because it's just something that unfortunately I'm seeing more and more people affected by. We see it in commercials, new drugs that come out, almost as common as what we saw in mental health awareness. And I think this is going to be something that's going to continue, unfortunately, be on the forefront, because it deals with everybody's gut health.
Right.
You can't get around that.
Is there still stigma? A lot more, or are we getting better?
I think as we do more to educate, I hope that stigma that once used to exist for these disease processes is less. But it is still GI symptoms that people have with this disease, and so I think there will always be parts of that. I think having the procedures that we have to have on a regular basis, people are familiar with screening colonoscopies for colorectal cancer, but I've had 15 colonoscopies.
Wow.
Right, so I get one every 12 to 18 months. Because that's necessary to manage my disease and make sure that I don't have an unacceptably high risk of cancer from colorectal cancer. There may be other prescribed therapies, and they're not really fun to talk about. They're not fun to take. They remind you that you have a chronic disease. And so I think what we want to try and do is normalize it as much as we can. I'm a very private person. I don't always love talking about my health problems, but I do it, I think, for the same reason Michelle, and again, another reason why we connected. We don't love talking about it for us. We want people to know that it's okay, right? If you've been diagnosed with Crohn's disease, we've all been through it. We've all felt this way, and we want people to be okay with it so that they can get the therapy that they need. Most importantly, that they can get a good relationship with their physicians and their healthcare providers, and they can get the disease process under control, which is what we really want to do for folks.
Well, that's why I can't even thank you both enough for coming on the record, because I do know sharing private medical information can be difficult, and sharing your story has been incredible, and I hope that it's helped people out there. So once again, guys, Michelle Turman, recommended by a viewer. So if there is a topic that you would like to discuss, or maybe a love story, please email us. Also, please share the show. We're on multiple social media platforms, and we're also on Roku with some very exciting news coming up soon. But again, we always appreciate it. Dr. Mark Moseley, Michelle Turman, thank you so much for coming on the record.
Thank you
for having us.
Absolutely. Stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you next week.